All right. Well, just in the interest of time, and of course, I think we'll get straight into it. And I would love to kind of, I'll just stay in the background here while you guys discuss. But I think let's maybe start by framing this at a very high level, like kind of how do you think about the definition between owning versus renting, and at what point does it make sense to own versus rent? So I don't know if anybody wants to open up and have some strong thoughts on it already.
I mean, this is like, we've been doing this for 20 years with AWS now.
Yes.
My builds on Vercel are definitely encouraging me to start owning, but there's a lot of benefit usually to the rental model. Like getting up and going has been incredibly fast. One thing I would say that's really interesting is that with the code agents are great. Like Gemini 3 came out today, it's really good. Where I used to spend a lot of time building infrastructure, like, I got to do all the Terraform and DevOps and all this. Oh my God. Now I'm just like, hey, Gemini, can you just deploy this thing? And I think a lot of the DevOps and like those things where it was actually just like renting was a lot less friction, not so much anymore. And so I think that owning is actually, like, if the value was like, well, now I have to pay an engineer to do this, not anymore. I can just do it myself. So I think that's like really changed in like the last year. That's a really new thing because of AI.
That's super interesting observation. And do you think we're going to hit a point where it's parity or as easy to own as it is to rent, or will that never be the case?
For me now, like I had to do like an email campaign where you can like sign up and send your friends, and then so I was like looking at viral loops, and I was like, I could literally just Gemini this faster than I could sign up for this bullshit and integrate it. And so I did, and I saved myself like $600 a year, but also it was just way easier, and it did exactly what I wanted. And that like bespoke customization is like an element of interop with this AI stuff that I just, I could have envisioned it, but now using it, it's like, wow, this really works.
Anybody else want to comment on that? Do you guys feel the same way?
I mean, like, on this, like, I would like to own a house in Las Vegas, but like, I can't, right? Like, so there are like limitations on when we talk about owning and building. I think one of the good metric to look at is how much financial benefit is for you. If you look at most of the hedge funds, they own their AI, right? But if I just want an AI agent to book tickets for me with the best prices, I would probably not want to own that, right? It's like an infrastructure hassle for me to keep maintaining all of those for having no financial value at all, or like a very little financial value at all. So I feel like that is the point where you decide, like, is it financially viable for you to kind of start owning it and trying to get a bigger piece in the pie? And if it still makes sense for you, if not, then you should always rent, So yeah.
I mean, just to expand on this, I think very few will actually own. Like, it's not just financial resources, but I think data is going to be the big differentiator. You will have like very specific niche agents that are based on proprietary data, and that's why you pay someone to rent this agent, because it can do something that you don't have access to.
Yeah, I guess the way I've been thinking about it is like, what are you even owning, or what are you renting, right? Is it the model? Is it the GPUs? Is it the agent? Like, what is it actually, right? Or what are you owning? Similar to like the housing kind of like perspective, it's like you actually may not want the headache or the overhead of owning the thing. Or the other question you can ask is the entity or person you're renting from, would you want to enable them even economically further if you're renting from them versus another like entity, right? So there's like so many like nuanced questions that pop up as a result of this.
I think this is definitely a question of, like, what are we owning? It used to be like, okay, well, it's either AWS, or I can go like pay Hetzner, or I can just go buy like $1,000 rig, which is not a lot, like, relative to my cost, it's not crazy, and that can do everything. But with GPUs, it's kind of different, because now it's like, well, to just do like what ChatGPT does, that outlay is like 200, 300 grand just to get that one response, and that's for one user at a time. Maybe you can batch it and stuff. So I do think it really matters, like, well, what are you owning? And we want to own some things. I want to like have my data be local and context and stuff, but also do I want to spend like 30 grand on like a tiny box GPU thing? Like, not really. So I think a lot of us, especially with training, like the difference between running something like locally on my computer and actually training it is also like just huge difference in what I need. So I'm probably going to rent that, right? Like I'm going to go to CoreWeave and I'm going to rent that. So it's just like, it depends on, it would be great if we could own everything, but there is a practicality here.
But interesting, don't you think if I just use the Eliza framework and I create an agent, run it locally, even if it's an LLM wrapper, I own it? Because I'm in full control. I know the code, it's running locally. For me, this is the ownership part.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you end up like, all the data is locally in your database. It's your thing. The only thing is you are sending it out to OpenAI, but I don't care. They're not going to steal they don't care about me. Like maybe if I was like, an Elon Musk type, okay, that might be interesting. But I think that for most of us, like the risk to them of like using my data for anything other than training, which they will probably do, is like pretty high. I can count on them training it. Me as an open source person, I want them to train on my data so that it like gives me better results. There's benefit to that as well.
But as a crypto person, you want to be paid for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I agree with lots of the themes coming out here. You've got how much is it going to cost me to actually own instead of rent? How much benefit am I actually going to get? Do they counter each other or not? And where it really becomes interesting is when the experience is as easy, the barrier to adoption is very, very low. It's very cheap to start. For example, with these agents, you just chuck like $17 in and you're away. And that goes from being something that's costing you money to something that's actually earning for you.
I mean, the other, it just occurred to me, based on this exact wording of the question, Andre Karpathy, like maybe a year ago or something on a podcast, said that more and more you use these LLMs, right, the more you're kind of outsourcing your thinking, right, and you're effectively renting brain power because you're just delegating this, right? So at what point do you pause and you're like, okay, I'm owning my like thinking process, right, and I'm like hardening it as opposed to like kind of delegating this process and like renting your brain power. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, this is such an interesting point. We had a panel earlier in the week which was talking about intelligence capital markets and saying at what point does this become an agent which I was using for this useful service and actually start to become a business where I could be renting out something that's working really well for me and I want to actually own that. So the agents that we have, for example, you're owning them via their own NFT, you're owning them in these other ways, running them locally, blah, blah, blah. Like, as you say, like the more and more intelligent it gets, you want to think, I should be getting a cut of this incredible agent that I've been developing, right?
Totally. And it sounds like from the responses here that economic consideration seems to be the number one thing kind of on your mind. Like, how much weight do you give to other things, like some of the stuff we already mentioned, like censorship resistance and privacy and these sort of other vectors? Do you feel like that is as important as economic cost, more important in some instances, or is it like, hey, price is really, I mean, at the end of the day, price is what matters, and if it's going to cost $30,000, it doesn't matter because you can't afford it anyway.
I really think it's all about price. I mean, if you're a decision maker at a large company thinking about like, you don't care about Web3, you care about your bottom line. And I think there are situations, like I used to work at a Web2 company, and we would use vast AI and decentralized compute on the back end for our generation. And our cost was like way cheaper than renting A100s from AWS or anybody. And so there was a point where it wasn't like, oh, we like decentralization. It was just like 10 times cheaper. And I think that there is a lot of compute sitting around. There are opportunities here, and if you can exploit those, then the value proposition to a big company, and we need big companies coming in. We need this. The value prop is, dude, it's just cheaper. It's just going to be a lot cheaper for you.
And
I mean,
easier.
I think it's a matter of timing, though, right? Like, if you want some function or some work to be done, right, there's a certain economic price past which it's like, you're like, okay, if this gets like 10x cheaper, it's like, sure, it's cool, but like, it's not that meaningful to me, right? So I think when we get to that point, other kind of considerations or other dimensions will become more important to consider. Like, how does you using this product on a daily basis affect you psychologically as opposed to economically? Right? It's like OpenAI like owns like the relationship for like 800 million weekly active users, right? If they change like the slightest thing in their like system prompts for like products or whatever, like that has like a massive psychological effect onto like millions of users, right? So
I think there's also one more thing to consider here is like there are some things which cannot be like, sent out on a renting basis. Things like, medical data or, based on lawyers or whatever, right? Like we obviously don't want another Cambridge Analytica where OpenAI has all of it. And they somehow train an LLM to just extract all the secrets of, a lot of people or, like kind of like just searching stuff online. And even like back in like my home, like they're like now like doctors' clinics and they're just updating like patients' reports, like, on ChatGPT and getting all of it. Like, again, like, as you said, like, why would ChatGPT want to do it? They might be like kind of into targeted marketing towards like a specific thing because now they have much more data that Facebook or nobody else could have, right? So I think like for those kind of things, you have to put in the capital somehow or kind of like democratize in a way where you can compute in a way that you do not send your data. There are like ways with FHE and ZK like to kind of like move towards. It's still very in the early stages, but I think like probably like that is also one of the avenue which kind of kills the entire question of owning or renting, right? You like rent off everything, but still guarantee like all your data and your computation is on par.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it's really about control. Like privacy could be a reason why I don't want to give up control. But whenever I do rent someone else's agent or model, I give up completely control. Like I have no idea what this agent is doing, what it's based on, how it's going to be upgraded. That's why I'm a big fan of 8004 because it's the right step in the right direction towards trustless agents. And I'm glad Zoe asked. I think very few actually own agents today, and I think that's going to stay that way. So most will be renting, and it's just going to be really important to make this as trustless as possible.
And so I think that's a good segue. So like you said, hey, I want to own something, and I don't know exactly why, or maybe you do. Would love to understand like kind of what part of the stack you guys are most excited about in terms of the ownership today, and what of that stack do you want to own? Is it the weights? Is it the data? Is it the compute? Is it something else? Like, would love to just kind of hear your thoughts there.
I mean, look, the way the world is going, like everybody's data is all, if you have an iPhone, all of your data is in the cloud, and it's really hard to like not do that. So what I care about is making agents that actually do stuff. Like that's what Eliza does. That's what we do all day. We're trying to solve. And so I'm very interested in like, well, what is the user experience of interacting with an agent, of interacting with an autonomous agent, and how much autonomy do we want? And I'm very interested in those problems. But I think that like, as far as do I need to own my own data? Well, I would love if it was available to me and I could do stuff. And like, what's holding agents back right now is just stupid walled garden stuff. Like connecting to my Gmail is annoyingly hard, or what like any service and all of the services, just the thousands that I would need. And so like that being frictionless would obviously be the thing that enables stuff. But that's all at odds with like data security, I mean, that's still I think a big unknown for a lot of us. But the safety would be like, well, run it in a T on your local machine, and maybe you're at least like lowering some of the risks there. But there's just like everything with a non-deterministic system is going to have a lot of risks. So we're really in a simulation and just trying stuff.
I mean, I'm happy to take the risk or the problems of non-deterministic computation, but I'm not happy to take the risk of bad or malicious devs. So I think, to answer your question, I kind of want control over the governance part of agents, be it via token or whatever. I think the problem that people are underestimating is that this is not anymore smart contracts. So you have off-chain components, and those can be changed instantly, and you really need a way to kind of govern this. I think there's very cool ideas. I think we can be very creative. Like, why not have a Futaki mechanism to govern the upgrade path of an agent?
Yeah, this is actually one of the points that came to mind for me. So I think, obviously, we talked about being able to own your own agent kind of at the level of having its own safe and NFT and it's doing stuff for you and making you money. But I think really interesting things start to happen at this collective level. So you've got entire predict economy emerging where my agent's interacting with your agent, they're contracting other agents. And so collectively, we get this decentralization, which you were talking about earlier, where we're not reliant on any one person, operator, and their setup, but we're collectively owning this entire economy. That's super interesting. The data that all of those are producing is very interesting in the way that we've set it up. It's totally verifiable on chain. You can go and see why this agent made that bet and what the market was, and so it's all kind of there via IPFS. So that's another very kind of interesting thing where you could train a model on all of this data, which we kind of collectively own and is public. And yeah, the third point, which you've stolen mercilessly, was about governing via the protocol. You have to forgive me for using us as an example, but just because I'm so familiar with it. But at the protocol level, for example, we can decide that, okay, we don't want to incentivize these particular agents. If we start to fear like things are getting a bit out of control, we can change the staking contracts so that we're economically incentivizing the ones that we collectively decide should be incentivized. So yeah, interesting things start to happen at this kind of collective decentralization level.
I think for me, like there are like two things that we actually focus on. Sentient is basically the agentic common intelligence. So think it of in a way that you're kind of always trusting like one of the agents when you go with probably like the 8004 based on the reputation. But we try to kind of add a composable layer where multiple agents can have like a similar input. Think it of like, how if anything in a DAO goes wrong, there's a DAO multisig which kind of steps in and try to decide, right? So this common agentic intelligence would try to work together to come up to a decision. Now there would be some agents disagreeing to probably vote for one of the predictions, right? But that's completely all right as long as you trust that the common intelligence has to be right? obviously this is like a subset of what agents that you select in your pool, but ideally there would be like feedbacks on top of it, which also is something that you have to somehow incentivize, right? Because all the time and effort that, let's say, if I'm kind of like making agent, I'm using an open LLM to kind of like fine tune it based on whatever the code I'm writing, right? I would be paid a part of it as long as I'm doing it correctly, and there's a like a format for it to make sense, like, and that like, oh, like whatever new updates I made or new fine tuning I did does make sense and is applicable by other 5 agents, which are running by other 5 devs, So I think that's pretty kind of like interesting to me, because it might enable more truth in that sense, which we're not sure yet, like you might ask 2 LLMs, 2 different things, you still don't know the truth, both of the ratings would be higher, so.
Makes sense. There's lots of great ideas there. I think one thing that I wanted to ask you guys about, we've seen a lot of progress recently, like just in the last couple of months, I would say, with like ERC 8004, we're seeing X402. Like what are, if any, some other kind of potential unlocks that you either know are coming or you wish were coming, that like, hey, what are some other things that we need in order for this space to become fully interoperable and kind of sovereign?
I've got a little bit of alpha on that. Well, first off, like I've been working with Marko on a game around ERC 8004, and we're like really big on that, and it's been a great like opportunity to explore. I think 804 is not just like an agent registry. I think that's kind of the start. I think that a lot of this stuff is actually just like extremely important for the open internet, and we're just kind of like shoehorning it into the hype of agents, and that's fine because it's like not particularly sexy on its own. But like if you think about what the 804 registry is, it's an application registry. So any app on the chain can register, and then you can have like a Yelp, you can have a feedback system where you can leave feedback for the app, and the app can leave feedback for you. If you're a scammer, then it can mark that, and if you get scammed by the app, you can mark that. And so like this idea of a trustless application registry, I think that's just the start, is like, okay, well now we can actually, like our agents or just us as people can find the apps on a chain. Like, I know there's more apps than Uniswap. There's gotta be, and so that's the first part. And then the second part, this idea of futarchy is, I think, also really useful for moderation, where you can have, like if you have an agent that's staked, then if they're like, well, that guy's definitely scamming all of us, that staking becomes the liquidity under a futarchy market for like, well, should we ban this guy? And if we're all like, yeah, we should just ban him, then we all get to split the staking fee, the fee. And if you're like, no, I know him, he's cool, you can, you could like stand up for them, that kind of thing. So that's like the kind of thing that we're experimenting with agents. And we can just tell agents, like, be a scammer, or like go find the scammers. And that now we're starting to just do like simulation of user behavior. And I think 804 is a great primitive for this. I think it's cool, yeah, right, as an agent registry, but like this should just be like an Ethereum primitive, I think. The other thing that's coming that I know they're announcing at Trustless is like the Ethereum interop layer, which is like you can be an LP provider between chains, and so now you can just bring liquidity to other chains. A lot, like what our problem is, even with a lot of the people on stage who have chains and stuff, the cost to deploy, like to print every single thing to an L2 is still pretty expensive, and I just think we're going to go to an L3. Like we're just going to, like there's just no way around the fact that like my game takes up enough network like stuff that we just need a chain just for that game. And so then we're rolling up to, we'll be rolling up, and that has been pretty like, okay, now I got to go like pay Chainlink and deal with all this stuff. I think with EIL and these things, like this will be way easier, just like spin it up, go, and like have this kind of, interop between Ethereum chains.
Nice. Anybody else have something? If
I'm happy with the current trends. I don't need more new things. Like let's first get 8004 on mainnet. I think last time I checked was still like less than 2K agents registered, and that's still like maybe 100 devs that have been experimenting and constantly registering agents. So there's so much more to do. And I mean, 8004 is supposed to be trustless agents. Currently, it's just a discovery mechanism to find agents and have some data points attached. But there's so much more that goes into the actual agent reputation and the validation of the actual agent tasks, or the agent creation, the agent key management. I think there's so much work still to be done. So I'm not looking too much into different things that are popping up besides X402 and 8004.
And for me, to be honest, like I really like 8004, but with X402, I have like some reservation. I mean, if anybody was looked at the actual implementation in detail, there are like several problems attached towards it. Being it first on a single chain, being it on only compatible with very few tokens with support, like the USDC permit, like I think it's like 3009. So there are like a bunch of limitations, which I don't know, like if that's a main reason for like, to push something from Coinbase in order to do it, or is it just like a general design trend that they follow? But if you look at it, like that's definitely not going to be the standard. I would probably like bet on it. I think there's going to be something better based on these similar ideas of X402 that would probably be much more better, because that might solve, as you told, right? Like you need like cross-chain payments, right? With X402, it's going to be really difficult. You have to depend on a centralized facilitator, which could anytime be wrong if the Cloudflare is down, right? I hope Cloudflare, that does not happen again, but we saw what happened today, right? So these kind of things would kind of have a catastrophic effects if your agents rely upon different agents to do different things. And if it's like a long chain, one of the element breaks, the entire thing is like just a piece of shit at that point, right?
Totally. Last remark.
All right. I think it's a really interesting question. It's always a difficult one to predict what we're going to kind of rally behind next. And it's been kind of funny this week. Like somebody came up to me this week and was like, oh, you guys are an agent payments project, right? First time it's ever happened at a conference. In 2021, we were saying we're doing agents in crypto to blank faces, right? And then there was kind of hype around specific use cases, like the social media influencers or the kind of agent tokens. So it's kind of so exciting to me that we're rallying and getting really excited behind something we kind of thought was, we were talking about it a little bit, but it kind of felt too boring to be like this sexy thing that we're all rallying behind. So I think maybe what I would like to see is, as you said, like let's not jump to the next thing. Let's really take this as far as we can take it, and that's spreading to other fundamental parts. The self-custody, the transparency, and all these other elements of ownership. I think it's kind of sometimes seen that regulatory or compliance stands at odds with innovation, but actually these are two great examples. The custody, for example, is something that, in terms of funds, really goes hand in hand. Like users benefit when they self-custody their own funds. That also helps you as a builder. If you're not having to take custody of them, you're not having to meet these very high standards and take so much responsibility on yourself. I think going hard on ownership, on autonomy, and all these different angles, and really riding this wave, I guess, that we're currently in, is what I would really like to see. Maybe all of that's a little bit of a cop-out because I just find it so hard to predict what we'll be excited about next, but it's so great to see so much energy to these really serious efforts to build and standardize together.
Yeah, no, I like that message. It's the builder's mindset. Yeah, go ahead.
The one advancement I think that X402 will need to have, and it overlaps with agent reputation, is in the traditional world, the fintech world, we have like the concept of chargebacks, right?
Yeah.
And disputes, right? And like if you assume that extrapolate in the next 5 years, these things are going to become like economic actors, intelligent actors, right? Then they're going to mess up in doing what they need to do, right? But the payment's already been made, right? Yeah. So how do you go about like disputing that process, handling false positive disputes, true disputes, etc. So for like the full agentic economy to flourish, you'll need that like leg of the transaction like aspect of interactions like be fleshed out. Otherwise, like I've already like noticed agents who are interacting with this X402 enabled protocols of like they pay for something, and the result they get from the service is subpar. You're like, what do? You can't do anything because you've already paid and you can't reverse the transaction, obviously. So you're just kind of left there with not good results.
Definitely.
We're going to add to this.
Okay, 30 seconds because we're already getting side-eyed here.
I just think that we're taking on maybe biting off a little more than we can chew by like saying, hey, let's have autonomous agents that manage all your money.
Yeah.
That's cool. We don't yet have the data for how autonomous agents could manage money. Yeah. I really think we need like simulations, we need games, we need low-hanging fruit, entertainment, fun, stuff where if you like lost all your points, it would be okay. And that's actually like, we need gyms to get the training data so that we have agents that can do these things well. Anything that we have the data for, an AI can do like really, really, really well. That's what it does, if we have the data. We just don't have it yet. So we gotta like fail a lot and then train the next generation and all that. I
think that makes sense. I think that's a good message to end on here, that it sounds like there's a lot of appreciation for what's going on right now in the ecosystem around X402 and 8004 and stuff like that. But then like, hey, let's make sure we go execute on that stuff. Let's make sure we go get the data, and like, let's make sure we're building, right? Which is, I think, is a wonderful approach to take that. So with that, unfortunately, we're out of time. We could sit here all day, but please give a hand for our wonderful panelists, and we'll keep moving through the program.